not so much. But there's definitely something coming. Can you feel it? It's been watching us for a while. Talking to us, influencing our decisions, making art for us. Hell, I even heard Wendy's wants to hire it to take your late night burger runs. Guessing from this, you can probably guess what I'm talking about. AI. Now, I know this is not a new subject matter to talk about. In the last 6 months alone, we had this big boom of technology, from ChatGPT to Stable Diffusion, Dream AI, and about 100 other things. However, all these big leaps forward made me wonder, could AI animate? And I don't mean moving from A to B, I mean traditionally animate, with all 12 principles, animate in 3D and 2D. And my first thoughts of this topic were, yeah, probably, maybe. And that uncertainty bothered me. The more I looked into it, the more questions I had. So, as an average animator who's overweight, has bags under his eyes, and is addicted to caffeine, I decided to try to find out. With a basic knowledge of AI, I wanted to talk to people in the field of animation and get to know what people thought and what they believe could happen in the near future. Then, talk to some experts in AI and see if these concerns or theories had any validity to them. My name is Alex. Plant your assets in front of your screen, turn those ears on, and let's find out. Is this the boogeyman crawling up our beds, or just Sully trying to say hi? Is this a strange monolith towering before us, or a new tool to bring about human revolution? Is this a friend or a foe? Is it Judgment Day, or did we just fall asleep in front of the TV again? I don't know, but let's find out together in Animator versus the Machine.
Commencing. Begin.
Today we have Timothy Lethbridge. Tim, why don't you tell the people about yourself?
Okay, so I'm currently a professor, have been for almost 30 years at the University of Ottawa. Prior to that, I did my master's degree at the University of New Brunswick in computer animation, where we animated movement, not caring about the look of the rectangles and circles, but nonetheless, we animated things like schooling fish and objects playing soccer with each other and crawling worms and stuff like that, using interesting math that made the movement really realistic. And then in my PhD at the University of Ottawa, I went on to work on an area of artificial intelligence called knowledge acquisition and knowledge representation, where we were trying to study how to store knowledge about language and terminology and meta knowledge about knowledge and ad infinitum. And then since then, I've been focusing on software engineering techniques. But I've kept my, those two streams of interest in animation and artificial intelligence going to some extent.
Interesting. So as someone who's, got his toes in both worlds a little bit, a question I always ask everyone is, what is AI?
Okay, so to me, artificial intelligence is the essentially simulation, as it currently is, of behavior that we would perceive of as intelligent if it was done by a human. So, for example, that could be logical reasoning. And in more recent times, it might be creative writing, as in ChatGPT, that appears intelligent, creative photographic image generation, and of course, creative animation. But there are other aspects of AI, voice recognition that people perceive as, well, it really understands me. So that's the general picture of it.
Okay. So have people like yourself been working, or have researchers been working on AI for a long time, or is this just did they just stumble upon this type of thing? Or like a short-term research, or is this a long-term research?
People have been working on AI since the beginning of computing, back in the 50s and 60s.
Okay.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, Alan Turing, for example, was famous for basically coming up with the Turing test, where he said that if a computer could fool somebody in talking to it through he perceived, I guess, at the time of textual transmission as opposed to images. But if you could fool somebody to think that the computer was human, then it was that was the sign of artificial intelligence. That was the famous Turing test. And there've been a number of huge advances. People came up with the ELIZA program, which was back in the 60s and 70s, was people used it as a sort of very, very early attempt at psychological counseling by computer. I mean, it wasn't very good, but in those days, people thought this was really cool, and
Right.
they thought, well, any day now, or maybe any year now, we're gonna have leaps and bounds. But those leaps and bounds didn't happen because there was a number of famous situations where people sort of quote unquote proved that what they were doing was a dead end.
Mm.
And so there was sort of like local minima, so local maxima, as you want to say it, where people sort of gave up, thought that it wasn't achievable, at least with the current technology, and they called them the winters, the AI winters. There was at least two, sometimes people think three, until somebody came along, or a group of people came along with major advances. I mean, I studied neural nets in a grad course when I was doing my PhD. Would have been 1991, I think. And it looked really fantastic. And I remember doing genetic algorithms combined with neural nets to try and do some analysis. I was thinking of maybe applying that to my PhD work in knowledge acquisition, but the computers weren't powerful enough. So one of the things that really advanced AI was the application of graphics processing units, really powerful ones. I mean, I used graphics processing units way back in the mid 80s for animation, but they started to be used for AI, 20 or so years ago, and they became incredibly powerful, especially when they could be applied to neural nets. And then, sort of the clincher was the discovery of improved functions to allow for deep learning. So you have many layers in your neural net that really started to burgeon, 15 or so years ago, and then we started to see the rise of the current generation of AI hype. It's been hyped multiple times. This is the current generation where it's really getting public recognition now.
Right. So I guess with all this progression, we're not going to be getting into like we said, another AI winter anytime soon.
I don't think so.
No.
No.
Yeah.
I think AI is here to stay, and in fact, I think that given what I see in the multiple research communities, that we're going to continue on a pretty rapid upward trajectory of improvement of AI technology in the coming few years, even. I think we see Chat GPT and today and all these fantastic programs that can generate images and its use in animation. But I think that we're going to see that exploding even faster and further in the next decade.
Oh, interesting. So, from a technical point of view, could you see AI being useful for animators, or do you
I
think it
think it
will?
already is.
Okay.
I mean, if you simply do a web search for AI tools for animation, there's a dozen or so programs out there that claim to use AI. I have to say that I haven't explored these personally, but they claim to use AI.
Right.
So to help people generate sequences, help people uh, you know I mean, people used to have to do in betweening, right, and manually,
Right.
and then we have computer techniques. But now you can add a bit of AI into there to help the process. So generative AI is really the key to this here, where the neural nets can really help to build sequences and make characters move in interesting ways.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot of like, even with the new show that came out, like for Marvel, it was like a Secret Invasion. The whole title sequence was done using AI generated images, and there was a big
Mm.
hubbub about with animators who were like, "Oh, you took jobs away," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, but it's also like it's a tool that can be used." So I'm like,
Right.
I was curious what you
Yeah.
thought.
Well, the history of people saying, "Oh, it's going to take jobs away," is a history that dates back for centuries, right? So,
Mhm.
people said, "Oh no, the printing press is going to take jobs away from people who manually transcribe things." Well, actually, it created more jobs and allowed more rapid creativity. People said,
Right.
"Oh no, computers. Oh dear, we're not going to need so many workers because computers can do all the calculations that were done manually." Well, guess what? Didn't happen. The opposite. So my take on it is that just like with the use of word processing and all of the other computer technology out there, that it probably will add more opportunities of different kinds. It would democratize animation, and it is. I think people, kids can create animation, and this will become as widespread as the ability of people to, write beautiful looking documents in word processors or spreadsheets. Spreadsheets didn't take away from account. There's still as many accountants as there are today as there were, but now the average person can build up a head of expertise and become quite good at making spreadsheets. Yeah, they may make errors and they won't be perhaps as good as what a professional accountant can do. And therefore, the professionals will always be there. We have YouTube right now. I mean, everybody puts stuff on YouTube and they're editing videos left, right, and center.
Right.
Well, guess what? There will be vast amounts of animation going out on YouTube and similar platforms that are created by kids and hobbyists and practically anybody. But the frontiers of really creative stuff that
Mhm.
will make it onto the cinema and make the money will still be done by professionals, I think. Just like today, there's still a good film industry, despite the fact that everybody can post their stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, Even with even with the rapid pace of AI evolving, everyone always thinks of like the worst case scenario. They always think it's like, oh, it's going to turn into Skynet or like some Matrix scenario. What are the real life concerns you have with the pace of AI evolving this quickly?
Right. So it's AI. There's two steps in our future which we have to be concerned about. The one step is here now, and that is AI misused by people with malintent, both criminals and state actors. Right. So I mean, we see a tremendous amount of fraud attempts that look really awful, and you can detect them because they're badly spelt. Whether it be emails or texts or phone calls or whatever. And people are, although there are kids and perhaps some vulnerable people who tend to succumb at a sadly high rate to these kinds of fraud attempts. The problem with AI is that somebody applying AI can tell the AI to make it realistic and not make mistakes. And the AI, although AIs do make mistakes, that's the problem for the criminals is going away. In other words, there will be fewer mistakes. It will be more convincing, more realistic. There'll be
Hmm.
more successful extortion, fraud, and things like that. With deepfake technology, I mean, we see deepfake with photographically. That's going to, I think, pervade. There'll be videos produced where people, are shown doing things, whether it be simply shoplifting or other criminal activities, and saying, "Okay, pay me $1,000, and I won't put this on YouTube." And then, so that's the criminal level,
Hmm.
or simply, somebody coming on a online with a video conferencing and saying, making it appear that they're a kid. I mean, we see these grandparent scams where a text comes in saying, "Oh, I'm your grandchild in another country, and I need money to get back." And the grandparent thinks, "Oh, it's real." But now, what if it's actually an animated grandchild with the actual generated by AI from the actual image with the actual voice of the grandchild with a
Yeah.
background in a foreign country saying, "I've been kidnapped, come and help me." It looks like the grandchild. It sounds like the grandchild.
Hmm.
And it may be even convincing sometimes to the police. And maybe, as this gets better and better, it's going to be very hard to tell what's real and what's not. And so that's a very serious risk that we have right now.
Hmm.
Um, A secondary risk is just like we saw with cryptocurrencies. These sophisticated AIs take an awful lot of energy, and so if we're trying to fight climate change, I can perceive of a situation where we have vast amounts of electricity used to train ever more sophisticated AIs, and then with thousands of people using them, that also, and it's not nearly as expensive as training, but it's expensive, and so a lot of electricity use. And then, of course, there's the whole issue of copyright, because I mean, human beings can watch videos and immerse themselves, and in their brains they take in the current culture and what's out there, and then they'll be creative and generate things in their own way. And people sometimes might say it's copyright violation if you build something in the same theme, but but with AI, they're actually building this knowledge of what is really out there, whether it be images or text or film or whatever, and turning it into an internal model, and then combining various themes to generate output. And to what extent is this copyright violation, and what extent is it not? It's going to be very hard to tell. There's going to have to be some analysis of that. But moving forward further, I mean, these are the problems we have now, and they will get rapidly worse in the next 3 or 4 years. But moving forward further, we have the challenge of artificial general intelligence. And I think we're moving towards that at a rapid clip as well. There have been people who say, oh, no, never, these AIs don't understand. And right, I mean, they're not biological, they don't understand, they don't have, they're not persons, they don't have a moral compass.
Right.
And they lack grounding in the real world. So a human being, as a baby, learns to experience the world as it really is. They can feel, they can see, they can touch, they can interact with it. Whereas right now, the AIs are just in silicon and in computers, and they see images, but they're not real. But I think that people will move towards robotically making the AIs more grounded in reality, so they can both input, feel, and touch, and also output and manipulate things. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is the moral compass. I mean, we're affected by most people, not everybody. Some people have mental illness where they don't have a moral compass, but most people feel guilty about bad things. The question is, well, we can build this into AIs going forward, for sure. We can build emotions I'm sure we can build emotions. People are working on that into AIs. But the problem is that what if you don't? What if you deliberately program a system that doesn't have this? Because, getting back to the criminals or the state actors, you deliberately want to make an enemy attack AI or whatever, right? That is a reality that is entirely within either present day technology or very near future technology, because I would assert we know how to do it. We know now with generative AI and analytic AI how to make these things work. We have computing power that's way more powerful than the human brain already, with many more connections. And we can, the secret really is combining multiple AIs that interact with each other, that counteract, that make counter-suggest, just like the human brain has multiple lobes that interact with each other and send different signals to come to consensuses and make general decisions. That's what's going to happen. You're not just going to have one chat GPT thing like that does creative generation. You're going to have multiple that compete with each other with some inhibitive forces that say that's bad, hopefully, or that's maybe not going to be make much money, so we'll cancel that one out. And so these multiple AIs or pieces of the AI working together, I think will lead us to artificial general intelligence. And I think that's going to happen within 15 years at the outside, unless there's heavy regulation. And so I would be right on the side with these tech executives and AI experts who say we need regulation, just like we need regulation of the nuclear industry and other dangerous or potentially dangerous products. I mean, we have dynamite. We know how to regulate it, and the average person can't purchase it. and you have to be specially trained. And it should be the same thing for people who are producing AI programs. Now, users, if you're using a certified program that has gone through the regulation to do animation, great, no problem. But we have to be very careful about AIs that can be used for bad purposes. There needs to be regulation.
Right, because it almost sounds like, AI can bring about a new renaissance for some things, but if we don't regulate it, it could be our destroyer, or like it could just wreck everything.
It can certainly cause a tremendous amount of damage. I don't think the end of human civilization, because humans are pretty, but certainly really bad times. I mean, we didn't expect bad things to happen, like a Second World War type thing happening in Ukraine right now. That was a surprise to us. And I think that people will be surprised when, although it's been predicted, lots of people predicted it, but people will see AI doing something that will hit the world news sometime in the next decade. And more people, politicians will finally realize. I mean, there are AI acts being proposed in Europe and elsewhere. But they're coming together slowly, and there's opposition, and the public isn't sensitized to it yet. But eventually the public will be, because there will be disasters of some kind.
Fascinating conversation. Thanks, Tim, for talking to me today. It was very fascinating and mind-blowing at the same time. Well, that's it. I want to thank our guests for contributing on our journey so far, and I want to thank you, the phantom listeners, for hearing us ramble around the water cooler. Come check in next time as we talk more about the subject of AI in the animation industry. Let's find out together. Don't forget, keep your eyes on the horizon.
Goodbye. Aborting transmission.